Agad? A pleasant good morning, and I guess at this stage I can still safely say Happy New Year. This is the first time we'll be officially greeting you at the Prime Minister's press conference. This is his first for 2021, so welcome and Happy New Year. We are here for this press conference because the Prime Minister thinks it's important to engage and update the public on what's happening in the country. So at this time, I'd like to take the opportunity to acknowledge members of cabinet who are present. And we have key officials from the civil service who are also here. And that's a norm because we usually get questions about different sectors of the government, and it's important to have them here to provide the answers. So we are happy to have them here today. Just to inform you, give you a brief idea of who is present, the cabinet members we have so far, our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Richards, the Honorable Eric Evelyn, the Honorable Lindsey Grant, and the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, and we expect to be joined by additional members. We also have present here with us today Senator and Deputy Speaker in the House of Assembly, Dr. Bernicia Nisbet. We have Ambassador Michael Powell, who's with us today, as well as the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Osmond Petty, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Mrs. Elrita Simpson-Brown, Commissioner of Police, Mr. Hilroy Brandy, Lieutenant Colonel J. Anthony Comrie from the St. Kitts and Nevis Defense Force, Director of the Department of Statistics, Mr. Calvin Phipps, the Chief Executive Officer for the St. Kitts Tourism Authority, Ms. Raquel Brown. And as time goes on, we also expect to be joined by additional members of the civil service. For today's press conference, it's usually broadcast live. So let me also take this opportunity to thank members of the media who are here with us today, as well as those providing live coverage of the event. This press conference is being carried live on Freedom FM, Sugar City FM, Vaughan Radio, Win FM, ZIZ Radio and television, as well as various social media platforms, including the Facebook pages of and YouTube channel of ZIZ and the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service, also known as SKNIS. The Prime Minister is already here, and he will be happy to start off the proceeding by giving his opening remarks, following which the floor will be open for questions. And of course, as usual, we will ask members of the media to temper their questions. If you can ask a main question and a follow-up, and we will do it in a round-robin style so that we can get in as many questions as possible. So at this moment, I will turn over to the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Good morning. Please have a seat. Let me recognize the members of the Cabinet and to thank them for taking time to be here. In particular, we have our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Sean Richards, our Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Lindsey Grant, our Minister of Social Development, Social Security et al., the Honorable Eugene Hamilton, and we have our Minister of Environment et al., the Honorable Eric Evelyn. I want to recognize our Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Dr. Bernicia Nisbet, Permanent Secretaries, Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, and representatives of the media all. This is my first press conference for the new year, 2021, and in this regard, I want to begin by wishing all who are listening to this press conference a happy new year. This new year promises many opportunities, in my view, to rebuild our economy and society stronger and safer. Our able management of our country since 2015 has allowed us to build up unprecedented fiscal surpluses that have helped us so far to weather the rough storms of the COVID-19 pandemic. 9 months after the pandemic, we followed through on our commitment to deliver a stimulus package of over $120 million, the largest and the most comprehensive in the region. And your government kept all 9,477 employees across the established division of the government auxiliary employees, and the STEP program on the job. Additionally, 1,332 government pensioners received their due entitlements. We did not borrow $1 during that period. Our aim for 2021 is to incur minimal debt, and if and when we do, we shall apply it principally to assist with our economic recovery. Public confidence in my government remains high, and there are clear signs that our private sector partners are ready to more fully re-engage and make the necessary investments. It is the combined efforts of the public and private sectors that will give St. Kitts and Nevis, that will get St. Kitts and Nevis on a positive path of growth soonest, notwithstanding the attendant downside risks posed by COVID-19. Several private sector projects will start in the first quarter of 2021, resulting in more jobs, better incomes, and more economic activity in our federation. We are well aware that just on the 22nd of December or thereabout, TDC launched the Duas Residential Development. The construction is expected to start in a few weeks. TDC's managing director, Mr. Earl Kelly, reported that TDC had already spent over $3 million to advance the 5.7-acre development. The residencies will be offered at prices ranging from $540,000 for a lovely upscale 2-bedroom model to $960,000 for a 4-bedroom model. The Duas development will provide, I am advised by Mr. Kelly, about 100 jobs. Carpenters, masons, laborers, steel benders, plumbers, electricians, painters, truckers, you name them. They all will be employed at this project. The forecasted construction cost of this project is put at $16.5 million. At the popular Jacta Hotel, now better known as the Royal St. Kitts Resort, we expect completion of the Cove condominium development and the commencement of a brand new high-end villa project in February. The Cove development will deliver 12 spacious suites with private outdoor patios surrounding a pool. The Cove development, I am advised, will be completed on the 15th of February 2021. The total investment in the Cove project is put at 10.8 million. It is expected that the constructions will start this year on the first phase of 6 luxury villas, which will each cost $1 million US, and the total project cost is put at 16.2 for this first phase. I'm happy to report on a matter that has been of concern to the people of Number 6, and that is the prolonged closure of the Sadler's branch of the St. Kitts and Nevis Anguilla National Bank. The long season of denied access to convenient banking services to the people of Sadler's and St. Christopher's 6 in particular is now being addressed by the bank board. Better service will be provided to the people. I am advised that at this point, the National Bank is receiving estimates from potential service providers to, as it were, construct and retrofit this branch. I have some good news too as it relates to the return to St. Kitts of students enrolled with Ross University. We anticipate the return of over 600 students during the course of the first quarter. I'm advised that to date, 140 students have already returned, and another 515 students are expected shortly. We welcome the return of as many students and faculty members as possible. Landlords and service providers certainly will be happy at this news. There are the entrepreneurs, including our operators of saloons and spa, taxis, car rental entities, bars, restaurants, and you name them, who benefit from the presence of this student body on St. Kitts and Nevis. The multiplier effect of their expenditure across the economy will be significant. My government will work with all the offshore universities in a mutually supportive way. The presence of a large number of students on island is significantly beneficial to the entire Federation. We will provide the safest and most conducive environment to facilitate the provision of quality tertiary level education here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Let me, at this point, convey my well wishes and that of the government to the student who was seriously injured in a shark attack. This is a tragic occurrence with which we all empathize. Our prayers are with the student, your family, friends, and the entire university community. We are optimistic that our CBI program will do well this year. I want to provide an update on just a couple of the real estate projects. First, Hillsborough Suites and Residences, located in the Matinley area. The first phase of Hillsborough Suites and Residences, consisting of some 40 luxury, 800 square feet, one-bedroom condominiums, is expected to be completed by the end of the second quarter 2021. I'm advised that phase 2, which is earmarked to commence in the first half of 2022, that is next year, will add a further 60 luxury suites and conference facilities. Work is at an advanced stage at the project, the current focus being on completing the interior finishing, which had been slightly delayed as a consequence of COVID-19. Commencing on Monday, the 18th January 2021, I am advised that the workforce will increase on site to 45 persons as external works begin on the pool, the parking, fencing, and other external infrastructure. Hillsborough Suites and Residences aims to provide a modern development of which all citizens and residents, and indeed their guests, can be justifiably proud. Turning to Seaview Hotel in West Basseterre, significant progress is being made at this hotel, and the first phase of this project will see an addition, I am advised, of 100 rooms to our hotel room stock, and several commercial spaces will be ready for occupancy by June of this year. In March, ZIZ will be celebrating 60 years of broadcasting. ZIZ is really the people's radio station. It has delivered yeoman service to our country, and I want to commend its leadership over the years for their work. ZIZ has undergone significant changes in technology, in administration, etc. over the last 5 years. I must commend the chairman, Lester Hanley, for his leadership so far. Recent upgrades at ZIZ Broadcasting Corporation include infrastructure upgrades to the television station and production studio, including complete remodeling and retrofitting of the production studio with repairs to the roof, the installation of new air conditioning units and transmission spaces. Partial upgrade to the radio station and television station IT network will better facilitate increased bandwidth needed through both stations. Upgrades to its cameras, outside broadcasting equipment, and production computers and in-studio lighting have all taken place. Having upgraded most of its television production capability, ZIZ Television experienced immediate improvement in its ability to produce content for local consumption on television and across several online and social media platforms. This has made it unnecessary to carry wholesale news packages from other stations as fillers to its newscasts. ZIZ has returned to live production of its news and in-studio production. I'm advised that ZIZ reaches viewers or listeners in 113 countries worldwide across its multiple platforms. It has 4 million Facebook views, YouTube 1 million views, ZIZ Online has 1.2 million hits, ZIZ TV Online website 1.1 million hits, ZIZ Radio Online website app tuning 2 million hits. ZIZ is a predominant broadcasting station in St. Kitts and Nevis, popular with and loved by all our citizens and residents at home and abroad. The country's oldest and best radio station, best known radio station, will shortly release its program of activities to commemorate this historic 60-year milestone. ZIZ is in many respects the nation's most reliable source for popular programming and authoritative issues such as COVID-19 briefings, Working for You, and Leadership Matters. Turning to Leadership Matters, this program started in 2020 on ZIZ Radio and television and social media platforms and attracted a social media viewership of 410,334 over 30 editions, or an average of 13,677 views across Facebook, YouTube, etc. Of course, in addition to online platforms, thousands more tune in to Leadership Matters and radio and TV. The program will resume in the first week of February 2021. I want to thank the loyal fans of the program and well-wishers for their amazing support for Leadership Matters specifically and ZIZ more generally. I now turn to some issues relating to our Foreign Service. Last Monday, I updated Cabinet on our efforts to fill the vacancy for a permanent representative to the United Nations. His Excellency Ian Patrice Liebert has been designated to serve as our permanent representative to the United Nations. United Nations, of course, is the premier global organization with over 193 member states and a large number of entities accredited to it. Ambassador Liebert has served the country well as its Minister of Public Infrastructure et al. He is well versed in a range of public and private sector matters, and he will be an asset to our country in this regard. I am advised that other Foreign Service officers are being transferred from capital to postings in our embassies and missions abroad. I want to wish all of them well. Mr. Sheldon Henry will join Ambassador Ian Liebert working at the permanent mission to the United Nations as Second Secretary. Ms. Chanel Williams has been approved for assignment to the permanent mission to the OAS in Washington, D.C. as First Secretary. Ms. Dinala Laplace will be posted to our High Commission in Ottawa as Second Secretary. I wish all of these, our nationals, outstanding success in their new assignments. I am pleased to advise that the Cabinet has approved the formation of the board to guide the operations of the Medicinal Cannabis Authority. The composition of the board is being actively pursued. What is the role of this board in our efforts to build out a cannabis industry, focusing on the medicinal arm? Subject to the provisions of the Cannabis Act, the board shall inter alia be responsible for the policy, strategic direction, and governance of the new authority. In performing its functions, the board shall monitor the administrative operations of the authority, b. submit recommendations to the Cabinet in relation to the issuing of licenses and other authorizations, c. advise the Minister on matters of general policy relating to the management and development of an efficient and regulated medicinal cannabis industry. D. ensure that the authority receives and manages its funds in a prudent manner. And D. do all such things as the board reasonably considers necessary or expedient for the purpose of carrying out its functions under this Act. This week, the CARICOM community held a special emergency meeting, by and large to discuss how we could move forward as a region in the context of our lived reality with respect to COVID-19. One of the many matters discussed was availability of vaccines, and the CARICOM heads reiterated our concern for equitable access to an efficacious vaccine, and of course, we denounce efforts at vaccine nationalism. By that, we see developing the tendency where specifically the larger and richer countries are being the first to have access to the vaccine. And having regard to the requirements and the quantum available, we are attempting to ensure that consideration be given to all countries, all regions of the world. And therefore, there must be a regime that allows for equitable access. Indeed, in the fight against COVID, so long as one country has it, all of us have it. It is a transboundary issue which we have to confront together. At present, there are 11 ongoing phase 3 trials, and 3 vaccine candidates have received emergency use authorizations, the 3 being the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, Moderna vaccine, and the AstraZeneca vaccine. The The COVAX facility is a global mechanism for pooling the purchasing and fair distribution of vaccines. And it is one of the 4 pillars as we undertake to defeat COVID-19. Vaccines, of course, loom large. It is one of the 4 pillars that we have to address if we are going to win the fight. And we have internationally what has been described as the Facilitation Council. St. Kitts and Nevis is a member of that authority by virtue of my quasi-cabinet position among CARICOM heads as the lead Prime Minister and matters to do with health, among other issues. The COVAX facility then is a global mechanism for pooling the purchasing and fair distribution of vaccines, and it hopes to be able to allocate about 2 billion doses in 2021. St. Kitts and Nevis, you are aware, has already submitted its payment and confirmed its participation in the COVAX facility since October last year. On January 5, 2021, the government of the Republic of China committed to a special fund of US $600,000 for the purchase of additional vaccines. Our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, is leading the national efforts regarding COVID-19 vaccines, and she is our technical advisor to the Facilitation Council. The end of the pandemic, of course, is dependent on rapid vaccination as well as the continued application of non-pharmaceutical measures which they already know so well and must continue to comply with. The wearing of masks, the regular hand hygiene, the social and physical distancing remain important. For St. Kitts and Nevis, we have set ourselves the ambition of being able to vaccinate 70% of the population. We think by achieving this, this will help to prevent clusters of COVID-19 and, of course, local transmission. We are still many miles from this. The vaccine is not yet here, but we are up in the queue, having made initial payments, and certainly the contribution from the government of Venezuela will take us closer to achieving this significant target. Republic of China, Taiwan. That is the official name, the Republic of China. Taiwan is the popularized name. As with St. Christopher Nevis, St. Kitts, so Republic of China, Taiwan. We ended 2020, I'm turning now to the issue of law and order, with a 20% reduction in major crimes when compared to 2019. Additionally, our detection rate for homicides rose to 40%. This is the 3rd year in a row that we have experienced a significant reduction in overall major crimes, and there are about 14 categories, apart from homicides, rape, malicious damage, etc., all part of what we consider or described as major crimes. 10 homicides were recorded in 2020. In 2019, 12 homicides were recorded. Homicides, you will note, continue to decrease year after year. Additionally, our detection rate for 2020 is 40%. I just said that before. We hope in due course to further enhance the safety and security of St. Kitts and Nevis to such an extent that homicides are reduced to single digit. Indeed, in the ideal world, we would wish that there be none. In the secular world, there will be. And so the realistic expectation is that we will keep homicides in our country low as possible. And we're working hard to do that. The police is making progress in its investigations on the 2 recent homicides in Basseterre. I must remind our citizens and residents that each of us can contribute to crime reduction if we practice to say something when we see a crime being committed or we become privy to any information on it. No one must be allowed to take another's life with impunity, and the law must take its course. We must never recoil from seeking peace and pursuing it. We continue to work hard to make St. Kitts and Nevis the safest small island state in the world. We commiserate, of course, with all families who have lost loved ones due to violent crimes. And we promise never to relent in our efforts to eradicate violent crimes from our society here in St. Kitts and Nevis. In a more positive note, Her Majesty the Queen has graciously considered a recommendation for my cabinet through His Excellency our Governor General that Mr. Hilroy Brandy, our Commissioner of Police, be awarded the Queen's Police Medal, QPM, on account of his distinguished and meritorious law enforcement service spanning some 39 years. Could we give Mr. Brandy a special hand? Mr. Brandy's excellent record in law enforcement has finally received the recognition and acclaim of Her Majesty. I'm not sure whether he will be meeting her in person or virtually, but I want to commend him on this significant conferment at this time in his career. And of course, on behalf of all of us at Cabinet, I extend to you again, Commissioner Brandy, our most sincere congratulations and best wishes. The other matter which I wish to address at this time is the matter of street vending. This matter has been a source of public concern for some time. The overcrowding of our street in Basseterre by illegitimate vending, the exposure of our differently abled and elderly to risks and hazards by the improper placement of vending facilities in Basseterre must now be controlled. My government is in favor of small people plying their legitimate trade. In fact, we encourage entrepreneurship. And it has been really amazing to see the growth in businesses, in fact, official businesses, that is people registering, getting their license, etc., year after year. Last year we had a record high of over 800 business licenses being approved by the Ministry of Finance. And that is up significantly from 600 the year before plus. And it was about 400 in 2014, the end of 2014. So we have come a very significant way. In our view, what is taking place in Basseterre is not consistent with our vision of a beautiful and friendly city which allows pedestrians and motorists orderly, easy, and safe access throughout our city. To regain the best of beautiful Basseterre, Cabinet has approved an interministerial committee to examine and report on the matter of street vending. The committee is broad-based, and it includes representatives from the Building Board, who has a critical role to play in spatial development, the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Justice, and Legal Affairs. 2 vendors will be on that committee: the Royal St. Christopher Nevis Police Force, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, the Transportation Board, the Inland Revenue Department, and on Monday we added the Ministry of Health. What we have attempted to do is to capture the intergovernmental framework that deals with all the issues that emanate from street vending, law enforcement, the cleaning up afterwards, the health consequences, the consequences for traffic of having our street overlaid, etc. All those we have attempted to capture, and we have sought to give those who are actively involved an opportunity for their voices to be heard in the committee. The government's effort then will be to bring a comprehensive response, relying on what has worked, the all-of-society approach in this regard. The final matter I wish to take notice of is really the passing of Valentine Thomas. He was a regular fixture at these press conferences, and his presence will certainly be missed. I want again to extend condolences to his mother, Miss Dora Thomas of Greenlands, his children, siblings, and his colleagues in the media. Val was interred this Tuesday. The Honorable John L. Powell and I, along with ambassadors, the Excellencies Michael Powell and Ian Patches-Liebert, among others, represented the government at the homegoing service. And of course, we hope that his soul will find eternal peace. I want to pause at this point to give members of the media an opportunity to pose questions if there are any. And again to thank Jacqueline Bryan for so ably presiding over this press conference so far.
Good morning, Lashan Dixon, St. Kitts News Observer. First of all, people are seeking clarification on the recent announcement during the budget that a proposed 13% deduction for Social Security. Can you please address that proposal? And also, can we get...
Sorry, could you repeat that?
In the budget, there was a proposed 13% deduction for Social Security. Can you please address that proposal, and can we get an update on the National Health Insurance Program, the status of that program?
Just for clarity, there has been no announcement of a 13% deduction with respect to Social Security announced in the budget address. I'm not sure where that comes from. There has been no change for the record in any of the deductions as they relate to Social Security. What is now applied then? So there is no change that would have been announced with respect to that in the budget. The other matter of the national health is a good question, and we will address that one. We will here take a number of questions from representatives of the media, and then we will try to address this one. I will ask Minister Hamilton, who is also incidentally the Minister of Social Security. I am not sure if he made an announcement of a reduction of the Social Security, but that certainly would not have been in the budget statement. Mr. Hamilton, maybe you can address the national health insurance issue, and then we will take any other questions coming from the media rep. Oh, sorry. You have a gentleman standing. Could you introduce yourself and your media?
Good morning, everyone. Devon Cornelius, WinFM. Just a few questions. Are there any plans to...
Sorry, your media is?
WinFM.
WinFM.
Yes. Are there any plans to assist tourism workers who are still unemployed as a result of COVID? On February 1 and March 4, 2018, respectively, it was announced that construction for Ritz-Carlton Hotel and the Six Senses would commence in that year. Any update on that? What is the status of the project at the Strip? Can Minister Grant provide an update on that? Could you tell us about the revenue from CBI over the past 5 years? and what nationalities are investing in the program. And lastly, an update on the investigation into the death of the customs officer. Reports, also an update on the woman that was found hanging. Was it a homicide or a suicide? That was inconclusive. And there are 3 persons who are still missing, 2 young men and an elderly man. What is the status of that investigation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question at this time? Mr. Brandy has taken note of those matters as they relate to law enforcement, and in due time, he will be called upon to respond. He'll be ably assisted by the PS of National Security, and we have the Commander of the Defense Force if they need additional protection. Good morning.
Carla Berridge, ZIZ Broadcasting Corporation. Prime Minister, as representative of ZIZ here today, just want to say thank you for the commendation to the corporation on its 60th anniversary. Just a couple of questions. Can we get an update on the rate of tourists into the islands since the reopening, and has it met the government's expectations? Also, in terms of the breach that happened with the person that was in quarantine, what can be done differently, or what is being done differently? In St. Vincent, there is sort of a crisis in terms of the expectation that the volcano may erupt. Are there any plans for St. Kitts to assist in that regard? And final question, over 50 St. Kitts Nevis students graduated from UWI last evening with master's degrees. Some 48 or so of them were beneficiaries of a Team Unity Government UWI Scholarship Initiative. Can we get a comment on the success of the initiative and some further insights on the program?
Thank you for those questions, and thank you too for your contribution to the success of ZIZ, Ms. Berridge.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister,
Morning.
government ministers and other officials, members of the media, and also to the listening audience. I am Bjorn Handley, and today I'm here representing BHC Media. Mr. Prime Minister.
Sorry, you're representing?
BHC Media.
Okay.
Mr. Prime Minister, during your New Year's address, you mentioned that the government will be reorganizing the federal office on the island of Nevis. My question is, will you, the Prime Minister, be coming over to Nevis periodically to meet with Nevisians who are in desperate need of government assistance? Question number 2. Mr. Prime Minister, you and the Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet spoke well in regards to the digital transformation that will take place on St. Kitts. My question to you is, will this digital transformation be rolled out on Nevis as well? If so, can you give us some details, please? Thank you for now.
Thank you very much for your questions. We will pause and we will have some responses, and then after the responses, we will take, if time allows, some more questions. The ministers who will contribute will be the Honorable Eugene Hamilton. He has the issue relating to the National Health Insurance, where we are at with respect to that. He also can give a view with respect to any further plan to provide, quote-unquote, a stimulus to workers in the tourism industry who remain unemployed. We will have the Minister of Tourism to address the matter to do with the Ritz-Carlton and matters of the Strip think which were raised by Devon, Mr. Cornelius. The issues of the CBI, I will deal with that. Mr. Brandy will address the matters that involve the missing persons. Well, Mr. Brandy and or Cumry can deal with those matters and the other matters as they relate to law enforcement. I will ask the Minister of Tourism also, or Mr. Abdias. I'm not seeing with the wearing of masks, it's difficult to quickly ascertain identities, but the head of the task force would have given a report Monday to the Cabinet regarding the arrival into the country. So if we do not have, if Mr. Abdias is here, we would want him to address this. In any event, we have Ms. Raquel Brown from the Tourism Authority, and she too can provide some updated statistics. Mr. Abdias and or Dr. Laws, if she is here, or the Attorney General, who is head of the Mitigation Council, can perhaps respond to the question in relation to quarantine breaches. The Minister of Education is not yet here, but Minister Richards will in fact give a brief overview of the Master's Program. This is a program which started while he served as Minister of Education. It was a historic and landmark one to further enhance the human resources of our teachers and to make them, put them in a better position to provide a quality education to our students. And we are happy that we had recently a batch of them who would have graduated. So Minister Richards, the Deputy, will address this one. The issue of digital transformation, I'll ask the Minister under whom that subject matter falls to give some consideration to this. In the budget, we did announce that working through the cable, we will have, as it were, significant advancement in our digital platform in St. Kitts and Nevis. That had come as a result of special negotiations between the new Minister of Technology, ICT, and the leadership of the cable. And so I will ask her to expound more with respect to that particular matter. The CBI investment, I don't have detailed figures with respect to that at this time. The questioner asked for the figures over the last 5 years, subject to say that these are already in the public domain, and one will just have to refresh with respect to these. The question of nationalities, who participates in the CBI program, we have addressed over and over again, and it will be helpful if we know what was the underlying issue with respect to them, so that perhaps we could communicate more specifically on that. But for the record, the CBI program is a popular program. The persons who come to the program or who become citizens, they hail from a variety of other countries. The United States of America, we have citizens of Canada, we have citizens from Russia, we have citizens from China, almost all across every area of the globe. The program has found attraction. The Middle East, Africa, etc., we have them. And so even when we look into our local domain, we see a number of businesses coming and stream by Chinese. The principles behind them are all, for example, citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. They have come through that particular route. The principal person behind, for example, the Galaxy Hotel is a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have them involved in supermarkets, in restaurants, etc., etc. Just perhaps last week, we had the grand opening of Land's Kitchen restaurant in Frigate Bay, a new upscale cuisine been added to the menu of services offerings here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And the lady behind that, again, is a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. So we have a wide range of interests in our CBI program. That is why it has become the platinum brand, because persons from everywhere have come and have participated with respect to the CBI program. We do not discriminate, save and except there are about 3 countries which by policy we have refrained from taking applications from. For example, Iran is one such country. I think North Korea is one such country. These internationally have been described as or proscribed as countries. That is, they have an international black mark. And because we do not wish to incur any reputational damage, we have taken the decision as a new government that we will not entertain applicants from persons resident, for example, in North Korea and in Iran. Iran for a long time has been described as a sponsor, state sponsor of terrorism, etc., etc. And we would not want our CBI program to get involved, intermingled in any such accusation with regard to the applicants. So as a precautionary measure, we have not had. So at least 3 countries I know that we have prevented their citizens from participating. Other countries have, however, allowed those citizens to participate. But again, we see ourselves as a market leader, and our key priority is really to ensure that the good name of our country remains intact, and only the most discerning of persons become part, people who can withstand the test of the rigorous due diligence procedures that are in place with respect to our program. So that is with respect to the CBI. The nationality range is broad. With respect to the matter of the federal office, the federal office has been in Nevis maybe now for 20 odd years. One of the things that we recognize is that it has not been able to adequately satisfy the expectations of the government, having to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in an office there, and we wanted to do better work. So we are in fact going to be reorganizing it. We are going to ensure from time to time where there's a need for meetings, for example, that becomes available. We don't have to go to a Four Seasons or Nisbet Plantation if we need to meet with anyone on the island of Nevis. So it will be available. The federal government has a clear mandate. We work within that particular mandate. We deliver services to the people of Nevis in the context of our constitutional obligations, and certainly as part of our love for all of our citizens, we go beyond what is the strict federal compliance obligation with respect to services. Several Nevisians from time to time, in fact yesterday at the funeral, several came, Prime Minister, we want to have a word with you. But the time for them to have to make arrangements, some time to ask from their jobs, to take a boat to come to St. Kitts, we appreciate the inconvenience. So certainly a reorganized office will allow for us to be more appropriate and to offer more convenient service to our citizens and residents residing on the island of Nevis. And all of that, you know, we do to enhance the good relations between our two peoples, recognizing, as I said in my New Year's address, there is one state with 2 constitutional framework in terms of governments, each government having a clear role, and the federal government role is well documented. And so we work within that particular framework. I will now invite Minister Hamilton. Could you address those issues that were put to you. Some I would have enumerated, and if there are any that I miss, your penmanship would be better.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good morning to all. I want to also join with those who express best wishes for 2021 and trust that our nation will continue to be strong and safe as we go through 2021. I want, Prime Minister, with your permission, to congratulate my colleague, former colleague, Minister Ian Pacis-Liburd, on his appointment as permanent representative to the UN. I know that he will do a fantastic job in that position. The country will be proud of his representation. Lashawn, I thank you for the questions that you raise. The first one, of course, the Prime Minister, I think, answered it, but I will just reinforce his answer that he gave in that there has been no announcement of any increases in any deductions for persons contributing to Social Security. That has been a rumor which is spread across the country, and I will dismiss it as just that, a rumor. The other matter which you raised has to do with the National Health Insurance. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, but long before the clamor of the World Health Organization to encourage nation states to introduce national health insurance, St. Kitts and Nevis has been advocating through many documents issued in terms of elections and our manifestos that we will approach the concept, we will attack the concept of introducing universal health insurance. When we became the government in 2015, it is one of the things we embarked upon. At this point in our history, we have had the help, assistance of the University of the West Indies Health Economics Unit, doing an exercise which has produced a blueprint for the implementation of universal health insurance. We have had the assistance of Monroe Chappell actuaries, that they have done a costing of this particular program to be introduced in the Federation. We know, for example, Lashawn, that the cost of this project will be somewhere between $143 to $181 million. It is a significant project. Cabinet has therefore been apprised of this, and we have made the decision to put in place a committee to advise Cabinet on its implementation. That, of course, would mean, Lashawn, that consideration may have to be given to salary deductions from individuals. In other words, how it's going to be funded, what benefits we are going to provide, when will it start, the legislative framework upon which this should stand. Those are the things which will come from a new committee put in place this year to ensure that universal health insurance becomes a reality. We expect that it will be implemented soon after the committee has done its work. But we have to be cognizant also that we are coming out of a period where we have had COVID, which has stripped away significant revenues from our state. And so we are very cautious, we are very careful, we are very deliberative in what we do in implementing universal health insurance. When more is known about timing for its commencement, its costing, whether we're going to have salary deductions from individuals, etc., more will be told to you so that you can at least be assured that the old person in the home, maybe young person too, who is in need of support. I have seen, Lashawn, many persons who have, but for want of resources, suffered very harshly and died. And so I want us to consider that universal health is one of those things that our country will be embarking upon, which is also comparative. It compares with when we acquired land in 1975, when it was paid for in the 1980s for $22 million. And today we have made $22 million many times over. It compares with us putting a road through Southeast Peninsula, which has become the road to everywhere. Significant decisions. It compares to Social Security being implemented in 1978, which is the only revenue, income that some persons who have now retired have. Significant decisions, perhaps ahead of the time, which have come to serve the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Universal health insurance is in that category. It compares with our citizenship by investment program in 1984. When started, may have had many detractors, but today citizenship by investment is one of those programs that is of significant benefit to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. So we are working towards universal health insurance, looking at this insurance implementation as one of the significant developments taking place in St. Kitts and Nevis that will be a benefit to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we look for your support throughout this country as we implement. Many people like things free, and if we could, we will provide it free. But I am saying to you that let's all have a stake in what's taking place as we move towards universal health insurance. I hope I've answered your question fully enough, LaShawn. And I think there was any plans for, another point about any plans for workers who are in the tourism industry who are still unemployed. The Social Security was one of the major contributors to the mission of the government to provide relief during the time when we were suffering from COVID. We're still suffering, of course, but during the early stages of COVID. Social Security came on and provided for 8,000 persons $1,000 per month for April, May, June, and again in September. We spent more than $20 million giving support to persons in the economy. We considered that by providing $1,000 for individuals, if their propensity to spend is 90%, 90% will be spent in the economy, and there'll be a multiplier effect. We did not put money in people's pocket to throw away the country's money, but to create economic activity and to relieve persons who were also suffering from hardship. If it becomes necessary again, and the Social Security can, so certainly Social Security will make the decision whether or not to continue to do that for any sector. But we are also prudent because we understand that Social Security itself, by the 8th actuarial report, there was a line by the actuaries which said that the fund will be depleted by 2052. But by the 12th actuarial report, it says depleted by 2036. And it is getting worse because, one, decisions of government before our time has made significant inroads in the health of Social Security. So we're not going to be imprudent at all. We will do what we can, but we're making sure that Social Security remains strong. Let me clear that up for you because I don't want anyone to go away with the view that we will not do anything else. But understand that if it is that in 2014, the government made the decision, for example, to merge two bonds, both which were earning 7.5% for the Social Security and 8.5%, merge them into one, a $41 million bond, at which time when that was done, Social Security ended up getting that bond reinstated at 1.5%. That is a body blow to Social Security, which many people have to understand is taking place, so that it resulted in less earnings, less income. which is going to have further impact on the life of Social Security. Therefore, when we make the decisions to do more for any other person or body of persons in the institution, it will be based on the practical understanding that it must be done to help to strengthen the institution, which must serve our people as the years go by. And so, that may not give you a direct answer of what we'll do for them from Social Security, but Social Security will play its part and do so prudently. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Minister Hamilton. I think to put in 2 sentences, what he has said is that the National Health Insurance really is a legacy of a team unity government, and it will have ramifications for the generations to come. We are working very hard with the experts to concretize the way forward as to implementation, how, who will pay, and issues like that, the range of possible benefits that would be available to the beneficiaries of the program. And those issues, the staff, along with the experts, should have to in a significant way advance in the course of 2021. We will be able sometime perhaps around mid-year to give a more significant update. But national health insurance is something which a team unity administration is still fully committed to, and we are working on. From the answer he gave, you recognize that it is not a simple go. There are a lot of interrelated matters that have to and are being addressed. With respect to Social Security providing support to tourism, persons who work in tourism, the short answer is that the Cabinet a few weeks ago mandated that the Social Security Board should look at that matter and advise the minister so that he can advise the Cabinet what further response we can give. As the minister outlined, Social Security has provided a significant stimulus of some $20+ million to help unemployed persons or persons displaced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we, like you, feel for those within the tourism sector, and indeed all sectors, who continue to remain out of work. The Social Security has the database. It is best able to indicate what number of persons are still unemployed. Once that analysis is completed, the minister will be able to give a fuller response to that matter. But we have not taken assistance to our people off the table. Indeed, we are a compassionate government, and we continue to listen to our people, and where we can intervene in a fiscally responsible way, as the minister outlined, to provide that support to our people. I want to invite Minister Grant to address those issues as they relate to tourism. And where needed, Ms. Raquel Brown can add any other information.
Thank you, Prime Minister. A pleasant good morning to all. And like my colleague, let me wish all in the Federation a happy 2021. Indeed, 2020 was a challenging year, and we are hopeful that 2021 augurs well for us. Prime Minister, if I can recall the questions posed by the gentleman from WinFM, the first one he posed is with regard to the Ritz-Carlton, I think it was. What I can say with respect to the Ritz-Carlton is that we have been engaged with them for a very long time. In fact, I engage with them every week. In fact, I updated the Cabinet this week on the matter with respect to the Ritz, and that those negotiations and discussions are ongoing. You will appreciate that the Ritz-Carlton is a huge project. It's a project that is destined to be over some $200 million US. And so it's taking time. Bearing in mind also that because of the pandemic, things have slowed. But I am advised that very shortly we will be able to be in a position to come to the country and give some further details on that. So with respect to the Ritz-Carlton, the matter is not closed. We are still actively pursuing that matter. With respect to the project on the Strip, I must say that that project is in two parts. It's the Strip project per se, and then it's the project which is the Beach Nourishment Project. I would start with the Beach Nourishment Project, which is a project conducted by two local contractors in St. Kitts, Rock and Dirt, who is doing the land side of the project, and St. Kitts Marine Works, who is doing the seaside of the project. We have actively engaged Smith Warner out of Jamaica for the last 3 years, I think it was, whereby they did the necessary groundwork in determining exactly what the Beach Nourishment Project should be. After Smith Warner finished their works in terms of the project, we then engaged the Williams brothers, who are two young marine engineers in St. Kitts, to further the project. The project is costing us somewhere in the region of $6 million, I think it is. It involves putting in groins and breakwaters over at the frigate bed to make the beach enhanced. At this stage, we are about 3 months away to completion. We met up with a challenge, which was when we went to the bottom of the ocean, there was some reef remains, and so we had to go back to the drawing board with the marine engineers to determine what exactly we would do. Having sought that out over the holiday period, the contractors, both on the land side and the seaside, are now engaged. One of the groins have been completed. The other groin is expected to begin in the next 2 weeks. And then what will happen is we are going to pump sand from an area outside in the sea, which we have found, back into the Frigate Bay area. We're going to pump some 8,000 cubic meters of sand in. The effect, hopefully, with the groins and the breakwaters and the sand coming in, I am advised that that should now ensure that the sand is retained and we have a much wider beach, we have a much more pleasant beach, and we can see the economics of it returning to the strip owners and bar owners in the Frigate Bay area. We are hopeful that this will mean that the sand will not be removed again when there is heavy movements of the sea. On the land side now, in terms of the strip itself, we had some delays with the strip because we are still in the process of working out what exactly we are going to do with the matter for the sewage at the strip. We were between the St. Kitts, the St. Kitts Marriott, in terms of using their facility, which is underutilized, or engaging persons to build our own sewage system at the Frigate Bay Strip. Hopefully, we will have that advice within the next couple of days, and then we will determine what we can do. The other things to be completed at a strip would be the grasscrete, which we intended to do, the boardwalk, the sewage system, and then the exit and the entrance facilities. And we are hoping that once we determine all of these, we will have the work completed within another 6 months. So hopefully the area of the strip will be completed possibly by the second half of 2021. If I can answer the question with regard to the rate of arrival since the opening, I must have to put it in proper context. And the context would be that our room stock is normally and traditionally at the moment some 1,800 rooms. Post-COVID, we only have 602 rooms available, hotel rooms, for vacationing in place, which means that a third of the room stock now is only available. And this does not include the quarantine sites. It includes the sites of the St. Kitts Marriott Vacation Club, the Royal St. Kitts, Park Hyatt, and the St. Kitts Marriott. And in Nevis, we're looking at the Four Seasons Hotel, the Golden Rock, and Paradise Beach Villas. And these are for vacation in place. One of the challenges we have, of course, is that the normal visitor into St. Kitts and Nevis traditionally stays between 5 and 6 days. And so there is a challenge because of the 14-day quarantine period. But we all know that. We're also challenged by the number and the frequency of airlift into St. Kitts and Nevis. And as it stands at the moment, the airlift reads this way. It is American Airlines Flight 318 comes out of Miami into St. Kitts on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. We have British Airways that comes out of Gatwick on a Saturday. However, I should announce here that in terms of British Airways coming out of Gatwick, as we know we are tagged with Antigua, so our drop into St. Kitts is as a consequence of the flight British Airways going into Antigua and then dropping in St. Kitts and beyond. All tag destinations from now on, and the tag destinations include St. Kitts, Grenada, Turks and Caicos. We have just been informed by British Airways just yesterday, the network planning, that these services have been cancelled for the rest of the winter schedule until March 2021. So we won't have British Airways coming out of Gatwick until March 2021, since those have been cancelled. Delta is still continuing its weekly service from Atlanta, and that's scheduled to resume on March the 6th until November of 2021. They did not resume in January the 9th as we had scheduled them to because of the low demand for the destination during that period. We have Delta on Saturdays out of New York, JFK, and it's scheduled to begin again April the 3rd to November the 13th. Again, they did not resume January 9th, again because of the low demand at that time. Liat, as it stands, is scheduled 2 flights on Saturdays out of Barbados and Antigua. We have been just advised by Liat also that they are now changing that schedule, and they will now have daily service into St. Kitts up to March the 31st. So Liat has now rescheduled and changed their service, and they will now have daily service into St. Kitts up to March the 31st. Seabourn and Silver Airways, which comes out of Puerto Rico, they are there twice weekly on a Thursday and a Saturday from San Juan up until February the 6th. And United Airways out of Newark, New Jersey will be scheduled until February the 6th, 2021. Our numbers from December the 14th to January the 10th, 2021 shows arrivals of 2,318 passengers, 1,980 of whom were visitors. And I think those are my questions, Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Raquel, you want to add anything? Thank you. So that's the response that we have had. The matter of 6 cents, I think, just for the record, to indicate that 6 Cents Hotel was proposed by one developer. That developer is no longer interested in pursuing the 6 Cents project but we are in discussions with others who may bring a Six Sense property or another global brand to St. Kitts and Nevis. So I know that issue had come up, and I thought that one should address that one for what it is worth. And clearly what we are looking at high-end brands to come into St. Kitts and Nevis, whether it is Six Sense or some other more improved brand, the country will benefit. And so we are actively out there seeing what investors, what new investments we can bring to the Federation. Just a general comment. When we, in fact, decided to open more fully the entry into the country, we realistically took note of the fact that globally there was and there continues to be a very low demand for international travel, save for certain very specific places. And our tourism plant is affected as much by that general low demand globally as our other destinations. About a month ago, I read a piece from one of the hoteliers in Barbados who indicated that they were having a 10% and that the incentives, occupancy, that were put forward really were no longer considered attractive, at least by him and some other hoteliers. I just say that to make the point that nowhere within the region or the world is the tourism traffic where it used to be. Clearly, we would have lost out, as would have the rest of the world, in relation to cruise movements, largely as a result of the wise decision of the CDC to put a ban on cruise movements in America and elsewhere, and that being the largest region in which our cruise traffic emanates from. So that is where we are at with respect to travel. One of the other considerations that weighed on the cabinet was that we felt that it was important that our own nationals be allowed to come back home. For obvious reasons, many of them were quote-unquote trapped in foreign lands, and they had issues and other consideration which required them to return. Some of them had families, young children at home, who needed their mother, their father, their significant adult. And so it was a multiplicity of considerations that drove the timing of the opening. So in terms of expectations, we did anticipate, at least I did anticipate, that there will be no bang, no bonanza in the initial response to the opening. And when we look at the experiences elsewhere, that would have been the reality. Some who would have opened before, and some who would have taken more relaxed precautions than us, we know what the situation is. It has always been that delicate balance of risk. How much risk are we prepared to take? And I think that the wisdom of our maintaining the gold standards, the 14-day quarantine, which many people in the community at one point were insensitive to because they were concerned about the economic aspect, importance as it is now. We are seeing that some who had less stringent application have now seen the wisdom of going closer to the international best practice. So in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where hitherto they had observed about a 5-day compulsory quarantine in a government facility, state-sponsored facility, and 9 days at home, they recently reversed that. Because what we found out when we had just about 2 cases, the honest system of relying upon people to comply would not work well or consistently. They have, over time, come to understand that reality. And so they have now resorted to a 10-day compulsory quarantine in a state-sponsored facility Sponsored means state approved, right? Be a better word, facility, because usually they are hotels. And then after certain evaluations, you can go home. So we are seeing that movement. And when we look and we see what is happening in Barbados and in some other countries, the return to lockdowns, we are reminded how fortunate we were that in our country we decided to hold firm in terms of best practices. And I want again to commend our task force, our health experts for the guidance that they give us against very difficult odds and in the context of other national contemplations that had to feature, some of which we are discussing, the impact on the economy, etc., etc. But they held tough in those conversations and the discussions with respect to their view. And we were able to guide the country, I believe, to an appropriate level. We still wish that we could improve upon our stats relative to others. There's always room for improvement, but I just wanted to underscore how fortunate we have been, and we shouldn't take it for granted, and we continue to comply. I would want to invite now the Deputy Prime Minister, and then we are going to have Minister Byron, and then we are going to have the Attorney General to deal with the issue of breaches. There were some questions which the CMO would have been best placed to answer, and Mr. Abdias would have been better placed to answer, I think, in Mr. Grant's presentation. He attempted to give some information regarding the data-to-date in terms of arrivals. I would want to ask the questioner, though, if those issues that you raised regarding issues of quarantine and COVID are not fully addressed by the AG. He came in a little late, but earlier than the CMO and Mr. Abdias, so he would have gotten a sense and you could perhaps guide him into those. I gather the CMO and Mr. Abdias were otherwise engaged in national service. So we'll have the Deputy Prime Minister, then Minister Byron Nisbet, the AG, and then we also have Mr. Brandy.
Good morning to everyone. With reference to the question that was asked about the master's program, which the Ministry of Education would have jointly sponsored for a number of persons employed within the education sector, I note the following. Firstly, allow me to congratulate all of the persons who received degrees and certificates yesterday from the University of the West Indies. In particular, I must extend congratulations to our only living national hero and first Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Sir Kennedy Simmons, who would have been honored with a doctorate, an honorary doctorate from the University of the West Indies. Secondly, we had some 48 persons who would have graduated from the master's program. The master's program is one that I would have overseen as Minister of Education back then. Dr. Joel Warrican had approached the Ministry of Education about that particular program being undertaken in collaboration with CFBC, the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College. We readily agreed to it. In our discussions, we agreed to 3 areas that the persons can pursue the Masters of Education in. Those 3 areas are educational leadership, school counseling, and language and literacy. I note from the ceremony last night that 48 of the persons graduated. Initially, we had about 54 or 55 persons who had signed up for the program. Amongst those persons, we had teachers, principals, guidance counselors, education officers, lecturers at CFBC, and truancy officers. What is important, though, is that apart from the Ministry of Education agreeing to partner with CFBC and UWI with regards to that particular program, we also took a decision to pay more than half of the tuition rate for those persons who were part of the program. UWI had asked for a tuition amount of $15,000 to cover the tuition. The ministry agreed to pay $8,500 on behalf of each person who signed up for that program, and so we are indeed very happy to note that 48 persons graduated from the program yesterday. I think it is a significant investment in the human resource capital here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. It is also perhaps historic in that it is the very first time that you have had 48 persons from within the education fraternity graduating with a master's degree, and perhaps the only time in our history that you have had 48 persons graduating with a master's degree at the very same time. Again, congratulations to all of the teachers and persons from within the education fraternity. When we outlined and presented our manifesto to persons for the 2020 general elections, we gave a commitment towards ensuring that that particular program would continue. I note that there has been no intake or continuance for the program for this academic year, but the Minister of Education is not here, and certainly I am hoping that discussions will continue with the University of the West Indies towards the continuation of the program. It is for the Ministry of Education to determine what are the current needs within the ministry, and then to get the University of the West Indies to fashion the necessary areas so that teachers and other interested persons from throughout the education sector can pursue those particular programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister, for that response. I just want to correct an error made in relation to the foreign service placements. I think I did say Chanel Williams. The person's name more appropriately and correctly is Chanel Simmons. So that's the name we would want you to take note of. Apologies. We will now have Minister Byron Nisbet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Mr. Hanley, thank you for the question. In terms of the digital transformation efforts, it should be noted that this transformation is a federal project, which means that as far as our federal services are concerned, whatever transformation is done federally is done both St. Kitts and Nevis. Just this morning, the Prime Minister would have spoken to the restructuring that is taking place as it relates to the federal office in Nevis. There are services at the federal level that will be offered through that office, as well as other engagements that will take place there that would require access to the information at a federal level. That therefore means that whatever we do on St. Kitts must be replicated in Nevis in order to ensure smooth transition of information and that the information is shared across both islands so that anyone working or accessing the information or services in Nevis are given the same type of service that they would have here in St. Kitts as well. But just to give a background on where we are in terms of the digital transformation, we have begun the first phase of our transformation efforts, which is the whole of government strategy and the cybersecurity strategy. The ministry has engaged Deloitte & Touche to assist with this project. Just last week, we have begun the different interviews and meetings with the various ministries and departments across government to get an idea of where the different ministries are in terms of their transformation efforts and their IT, so that we can get a better understanding of where we are going. We have also reached out to the different departments and ministries in Nevis that also offer some level of federal services. We are still waiting confirmation for when we can have the interviews with them, so that too is also taking place as we speak. The meetings and the interviews have been going well so far. We've touched on just about a good cross-section of ministries: health, the Ministry of Information and Communications Technologies. I know they've also touched the Inland Revenue Department and Ministries of Finance as well. So the interviews are ongoing. In terms of the work that we are doing with the cable is assisting the government in the rollout of our government-wide area network, which means the fiber runs necessary to connect all of our ministries and departments together. That infrastructure is necessary in order for us to be able to roll out the necessary services and platforms and applications that would sit on that network to provide the digital services that are required. Just recently, as a matter of fact, just last week, in discussions with the cable, we have been trying to determine the best route to run those fiber lines between St. Kitts and Nevis. So those discussions are ongoing as we continue to build out the infrastructure. Outside of that, we are also rolling out Wi-Fi to our community centers. And from next week, again, in collaboration with the cable, we will launch the first in the rollout of the Wi-Fi in the community centers. And so that's where we are in terms of the digital transformation and our efforts to try to see how best we can make sure that we have that resource necessary in order for us to move forward with innovation and technology. And so I hope that answers your question. So yes, indeed, Nevis will be part of it.
Thank you very much, Minister Nisbet. I will now invite the Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Vincent Byron, to respond to those questions posed, and he will be followed thereafter by Mr. Brandy, our Commissioner of Police.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, and good morning to all who are here. I note that we have been joined by Dr. Hazel Laws, CMO, and I suspect that Mr. Abdia Samuel, who is also the chairman of the National COVID-19 Task Force, is here as well. And I hope if I make any missteps that they will nudge me and correct me. The whole question of quarantine of all who come to St. Kitts since we have opened up is a critical part of our response to COVID-19. We are very proud here in St. Kitts and Nevis that we have led the way in terms of best practices in our response to this pandemic that has had such a devastating toll in much more advanced countries, first world, in our Caribbean region. And we here in St. Kitts have been able to manage the process very well. And we must give all commendation to the work done by our medical experts, led by the CMO, Dr. Laws, ably supported by members of the Health Emergency Operating Center, as well as the National Task Force. That is a subset of the Mitigation Council, Disaster Mitigation Council of St. Kitts and Nevis. They all work very tirelessly around the clock, and they too need commendation, whether it's the Chief Immigration Officer, whether it's the Commissioner of Police, Commander of Defense Force. We have people at the Customs, Controller, his Deputy Controller, and a whole wide range of public servants who have had tireless, sleepless nights to keep us here safe in St. Kitts and Nevis. The idea is that when one comes here, one may have the COVID virus. It may be transmitted to other citizens, and it would have the effect of making our country, or putting many people, as it was, out of work, businesses may have to close. There would be a lockdown. Economic activity could grind to a halt. So keeping us safe, keeping us healthy, helps us economically as well. And there has been this debate, this balance. To what extent do we have restrictions as opposed to safety and health? But we believe that our people's health should be a major priority, our number one priority. And we think that we have done a good job to date. The visitor who comes to St. Kitts, whether returning national or an international visitor, each of them is subject to a quarantine for 14 days. If you are a returning national, you can go to a government quarantine site where you would have no contact with relatives or others who are in the local field. If you're returning national, though, you may also opt to go to a second option that is available to international visitors, and that is you can be quarantined in a vacation in place, a staycation at a prescribed hotel. These are the Park Hyatt, the Royal St. Kitts, the Marriott vacation, as well as Four Seasons Paradise Beach in Nevis, where you are able to stay at the hotel in quarantine, but are able to participate in a limited number of facilities in the hotel. Such, you may have meals, you may go to a beach, you are in a bubble, and that is, you do not come into contact as such with the local populations, with our local people. So that if, while in quarantine, you may have the virus, we are trying to protect our local population from any transmission. This has worked well so far. As I understand your question, is that there was a breach, and this at one of our hotels, where two individuals had the virus and had been isolated. They were separated from the body, and therefore they should not have come in contact with anyone. We understand that near the end of the 14-day or the period of quarantine, one individual found a way to make his way to the airport to try to get on the airplane. And during that visit, that travel to the airport, it was discovered and alarm bells went off. As you say, it was one that was embarrassing for the hotel, and they have since strengthened their protocols, their systems, to ensure that there is verification on who can leave and who cannot leave. But we are happy to say that our security systems worked. They responded immediately. The task force was able to get that person at the airport, isolate them, identify them, and they were moved to a government quarantine site where much more strict protocols were then put in place. We believe that our systems have worked very well. We have put in place a compliance team of other public servants who go and visit the sites, who respond to queries by the hoteliers and workers to ensure that we maintain these strict divisions between those who may be carriers of the virus and our local workers, our local staff, the local population. We have seen in some of our neighboring islands where workers at a hotel may have gone to their homes and carried that virus to their homes. The family then goes and meets at school and on the job. In Barbados, in St. Lucia, we have seen where there's been community spread as a result. And hundreds of people are now contracting the virus. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have been able to manage it. And we want the support of all our people to ensure that they do the basic protocols, that they support the compliance teams, that they support the National Task Force, because we believe that there's only a short while to go before we are able to get what the Prime Minister discussed earlier, our access to a vaccine that we can spread in our community and make us even better to combat the virus if, perchance, it was to come here and get into our society. But we need the support of everyone in the society. And again, I want to say that we are very confident that we can continue to protect our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brandy.
Pleasant good morning to all. Just like the other speaker, I would like to take the opportunity to say Happy New Year to everyone at this time, and I also would like to say thanks to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis for the support over last year in terms of the Royal St. Kitts and Nevis Police Force, in terms of our crime reduction and crime detection, that we were very successful in 2020, and we are looking forward for your continued support in 2021. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the Minister of National Security and the Federal Cabinet as a whole for bestowing, to making the request that award for my long years of service and my hard work in the Royal St. Kitts and Nevis Police Force. Once again, I want to thank you very much. In answering the question put by the journalist, I will first go to the lady at Halfway Tree that was reported found in her house with injury about her body. A postmortem was performed by our resident pathologist and come to the conclusion that those injury was self-inflicted. Also, the custom officer, a postmortem was performed by the resident pathologist, and his conclusion that that injury was self-inflicted. As a result, these files are pending before the magistrate court for a coroner's inquest, as speculated by the law, that you have to do a coroner's inquest to conclude these matters. Concerning the 3 missing persons, one from Cairn, who were last seen at Kim Collins, the other from the Basti area, the student from Clarence Fitzroy College, and the other was from Connery, the elderly gentleman. Those matters are still under investigation, and as information come forward, the police continue to investigate, and we are appealing to the general public. If you have any information, and like the Prime Minister said earlier, if you see something, if you hear something, say something, and we will investigate. I think those are the questions that I need to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brandy. We will now, we want to thank Mr. Brandy for those responses, which I hope would have clarified a number of issues as they relate to investigation of criminal matters. I would now ask the CMO if she would wish at this point to add. I hope that you had been brief on 1 or 2 of the questions, but we can, if the members of the press did not get all the questions answered as they relate to quarantine and any health matter, to please feel free now that the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Laws, is here, and Mr. Abdir Samuel from the task force. So we again invite anyone from the media who has any outstanding question or any matter to report, not having had a response, to feel free to do so before we wrap up. So we are open for our last round of questions. Oh, I am told there was one with respect to the volcano in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We would want to say that we have been in touch with the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Through the Prime Minister, Ralph Gonsalves, and recently, last Friday, we had an update presented to the Monetary Council meeting, that is principally a meeting of ministers of finance. In the OECS, most ministers of finance are also prime ministers, save for St. Vincent, where Ralph Gonsalves had resigned, and his son is now the Minister of Finance. He did give us a report as to the developments there, and we pledge, both as individual member states of the currency union and collectively, to be as supportive as we can. At this moment in time, at least based on those updates, they were still relying on advice and support from the University of the West Indies with regard to the situation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Should any support be required of St. Kitts and Nevis, we are committed to do the very best that we can in the circumstances. Yes.
Good morning again, Devon Cornelius, WinFM. This is pertaining to the federal office in Nevis. Are there plans to continue renting, or would there be plans to construct a space or a home for the federal office? And regarding severance payments for persons on Nevis, Minister Brand in the NIA said that over more than $1 million has been paid out to persons in severance. Any date as to when, or any time frame as to when the rest of the severance will be paid out to persons on Nevis? Thank you.
Thank you very much. With regard to the severance payment, I'll ask the Minister of Labour to provide an update on that matter. With respect to the federal office, presently we pay rent for a space on Government Road, and we are in the process of evaluating those particular arrangements. And in fact, we have visited a number of allocations where persons had called and inquired and offered their property for consideration. And we have a team that is paying some attention to that particular matter. So at the moment, and for the last many number of years, the space has been a rented space. We have had the opportunity, and I had an opportunity last Saturday while there, to visit a number of other options that have come into mix as other persons with property there welcome the idea and have offered their property for consideration. The committee is still working on that matter, and we look at a mix of considerations, so you'll be a team doing the analysis of that. We have not ruled out any option at this particular moment in time. And indeed, once a team would have very shortly fine-tuned with respect to the options that have now presented themselves. There are about 5 property owners who have offered their facilities available for this particular effort, and we will have to fine-tune with them and then have a discussion with the Ministry of Finance regarding a number of other considerations relevant to that matter. Minister Phipps, could you assist with the matter of the severance payment? Well, I think you should give a general update, although the questioner posed a question for Nevis, because there will be a general interest in this particular matter. Plus any other info.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your question, sir. In terms of a response that is general in nature before I come to the specifics of Nevis, I would wish to indicate that as of the end of December 2020, the following would have been the state of play relative to severance claims. The total number of claims that would have been received to date, 2,454. Total number of claims that would have been submitted between the gap of the 21st of December right down till just before Christmas would have been 65. We would have had a number of smaller claims trickling in on a staggered basis, not more than about 36. The total amount that would have been paid out by year end would have been just over 1,426 claims, and that would be the total process to date, and the total that would have been paid out by year end would have been 1,340. And those that would have been awaiting payment by year end would have been an additional 86. Now, let me just clarify something here. When I indicate that claims that were awaiting payments would be about 86, those would be claims that for whom all of the processing would have been done, with data being verified by Social Security, especially in terms of calculating years that would be eligible from which you calculate severance or calculate, in other instances, 1 or 2 long service gratuity and so forth. For both of those instances, for you to get a maximum payout, you would have had to have 17 years of uninterrupted service, relative to long service or relative to severance. In terms of what would have been paid out throughout 2020, in terms of processing claims, the government would have paid out $11,864,623.95. Now, in terms of claims to Nevis, I do not have at hand a disaggregation of the data St. Kitts versus Nevis. But what I can tell you is that the majority of claims that we have received from Nevis have been paid out to Nevis based on the order in which they would have been received. Most of the claims that we are seeing from Nevis would have been coming from, as we expect, the hotel and restaurant sector. So a number of the claims would have started being eligible for payment from Four Seasons as early as perhaps maybe August. Also from Nisbet's Plantation, Montpelier, and so forth, Golden Rock Hotel, and a number of smaller hotels. There are still some claims for whom data would have to be verified that we are awaiting. In a number of cases, the government would have made attempts to pay out claims before the normal expected processing time, especially in those instances where there would have been accompanying medical emergencies for the persons who are eligible to receive severance. So we have endeavored on both sides of the channel to ensure that when those special circumstances arise, that we will try our best to expedite the claims. But I would also hasten to add that under normal circumstances outside of a COVID environment, the average turnaround time that may be required from the entry of a claim to the verification of data across state agencies, including Social Security, might be as much as 90 days. We have tried as best as we could under the circumstances confronting us with the pandemic to attempt to pay out the funds prior to 90 days because we realized the hardship that individuals would have been facing in terms of when they would have been laid off and when their eligibility for severance would have been triggered. And for the benefit of public information, let me add that just because a claim has been made, it doesn't necessarily mean that the claim becomes eligible for payment immediately. Because ideally the law states that you're on layoff for a maximum of 12 weeks. Thereafter, severance can be triggered if there is no recall of the employee for any type of employment. However, if a recall is in order, that employee must be provided with at least 13 weeks of continuous employment after that return to work. And in a case like that, the clock starts ticking all over again, because it then means that the severance process or the continuum along that severance pathway would have been interrupted. I trust that that answers your question.
I want to thank Minister Phipps for that comprehensive response to the severance question, to make the point that when we took over, the severance fund was being hemorrhaged, that part of the difficulty had been that the former administration complicated the work in terms of the severance fund by adding a long service gratuity payment to be made from the same severance fund without $1 being added. So what was intended to satisfy claims for severance, that is, one particular benefit, now had to make do for two specific obligations. That, of course, has created a challenge. Moving forward, we have sought actuarial advice and how best we could capitalize the fund in such a way that all reasonable demands for severance can be made. We want to put it on a stronger basis. And that is why we have, over the last year, advanced significant sums. 11 point, what is the figure? 11.9. We rounded off to $12 million to ensure that persons who had been laid off can get a benefit. The federal government has also put aside, I think it's a further $7 million, 7.5, and she asked me to round it off at $8 million because the point does in fact confuse people. So a further $8 million for severance payment in 2021. You see then the significant burden that has been transferred on the federal entity for want of an appropriately structured severance fund. Moving forward again, beyond getting the certainty which the actuary can bring to the restructuring of the fund, we intend to introduce an unemployment benefit. And we have asked the actuary to look at how, with the presence to come of the unemployment benefit, what further reforms will then be required to the severance fund. Because the unemployment benefit then will become the first claim for a person who has been displaced. So those considerations are happening. We have sought the professional advice from the persons best charged to provide it, to assist us to move the country to a stronger and better place. So there have been a multiplicity of challenges, and the COVID-19 certainly has exacerbated a lot of the inheritance of complex issues. But the government is happy that we have found a way to deal with these problems and to bring relief to our people. I want to wrap up unless there's any other media personality wanting to pose a question. So it's for me again to say a hearty thank you, to thank all of you who have come, to have added to the public information that has been disseminated today through your questioning, some of them very provoking but important to the extent they go to the meat of what is on people's mind. We are happy to be of service. This government has had a track record of transparency and accountability, and we are happy that the media can play a constructive role in giving reliable information to the populace so that we are better informed and we can take more rational decisions. Again, I want to thank all who have come, the members of the Cabinet. Let me acknowledge the presence of our Minister of Foreign Affairs and our Minister of Agriculture, who have both joined us today. The other ministers, I would have identified them before, but to thank all of you, the senior civil servants who have been here, who have added value through their presence and through their contribution, I want to say thank you. And to those interested citizens who have come along, I gather one or two have come for the first time. They had what they call citizens' question, but then they got a little scared by the presence of the official media. So maybe next time we will have some citizens' questions being posed. Again, I say thank you to one and all, and let's do what we can to deliver the stronger and safer future for all of our citizens. Thank you very much, and we want to thank again the media for doing their job. Thank you very much.